Hey, this is The Hard Truth with Tony Shaffer, powered by 6 Hour, Never Settle. I had a choice of what I carried in combat. I always carried the best. I still carry the best. The best is 6 Hour. You should carry the best as well, Never Settle. We're on the America Out Loud Talk Radio Network, also available on the America Out Loud Podcast Network. Check us out, Project Sentinel, projectsentinel.net, projectsentinel.com, and Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Rumble, and all those great social media sites. And so today we're being joined by my friend and colleague who I have admired and worked with and who helped protect me when I became a whistleblower, former congressman, former prosecutor, member of the board of NRA, an all-round good egg, Bob Barr. Hey, Bob, welcome to the show.
Tony, great to be with you and your listeners.
Thank you. Well, Bob, Bob gave me years ago the meaning of the is, and geez, what happened? Bill Clinton condom fell out of it. How did you get that? I don't know how. Wow. Talking about memory. So Bill, as many of you know, led the effort to hold the president accountable. We can only say, Bob, looking back on it, man, what an opportunity was missed by not holding him accountable. I mean, we could do a whole show on the damage that his administration has done to this country long term by the lawlessness that I don't think we fully understood back then. So, but thank you for joining us today.
Certainly.
And then we're also joined by Lieutenant Colonel retired Tim Wilson. Tim is our lead on Second Amendment issues. He is. You're going to understand today that he is from a nation not of the United States, but he is a United States citizen now. Correct? Is that right, Tim?
Absolutely. And I still stick to I learned the Pledge of Allegiance before I learned God Save the Queen.
That's right. And as we mentioned in the pre-show, he was admitted to be a U.S. citizen because he actually has good teeth. So that's another bonus, right?
So you say, Tony.
Double bonus. I know. I get in trouble every time I go to England and I say, "Are those really your teeth?" So I don't do that. I try not to. So, well, let's roll right into it. So, Bob, we asked you here today because of several issues that have been playing out. One of them is this governor in New Mexico. And I never thought I'd see the day from any political party where a declaration would be made to deny law-abiding citizens who are not only law-abiding, they're actually issued, well, I don't think you should have them because I believe in constitutional carry, but even those who are issued official documentation by the state of New Mexico saying they can conceal carry, to say you can't conceal carry for the interest of quote unquote getting guns off the street. And I'm going to say something obvious. Bob, I know you know this. You're a former federal prosecutor. I know Tim knows this, but maybe the governor doesn't understand. Governor Lujan Grisham. Bob, is there any indication that criminals follow the law when they're told not to do something?
Well, your question answers itself. Criminals, by their nature and by definition, are criminals and do not follow the law. No matter how many executive orders the governor of New Mexico or Governor Gavin Newsom or Governor Kathy Hochul may issue, no matter how many laws the legislatures of those or other states may pass infringing the right to keep their arms, it will have absolutely no effect on criminals. And that's the fundamental flaw in all of these things that they're doing. It harms law-abiding citizens.
Bob, if I may jump in and just ask, what on earth do you think her motive is in suspending parts of the Constitution and claiming that the Constitution is not absolute in this pursuit of getting guns off the streets by banning where law-abiding permit carrying citizens are now banned from carrying them in large swathes of New Mexico?
It's always difficult to get inside the head of an idiot and figure out what it was that they were thinking. In this, and I don't use that term lightly. There are some governors who are very smart, who know exactly what they're doing when they pass gun legislation. In her case, I don't think she knows what she's doing. And not only is what she did with these executive orders, and also, by the way, the Secretary of Health for the state of New Mexico is complicit in this because he's the one that issued the actual action plan implementing the actual restrictions under the governor's emergency orders. But not only are the executive orders and the action plan clearly contrary to and violative of the Second Amendment, but they are also clearly violative of New Mexico's explicit constitutional guarantee in their state constitution.
Right.
So one has to presume that she really didn't know what she was doing, although she may now that a court has stepped in and she's been sued several times already. These lawsuits are pending. But it's sort of the typical response by a lot of government officials when they see an increase in criminals committing crimes with firearms, that it's easier to simply pass a law that affects everybody than it is to actually go after, investigate, and prosecute the bad guys. So it's the easy way out for these people. We see it in all sorts of other government regulations as well. Just paint with a broad brush rather than do the hard work of going after the criminals.
Well, Bob, let me follow up on that. I now live in North Carolina, a very red county, place called Chewan County, smallest county in North Carolina. We're very red. We have a little town called Edenton, which is blue, but the whole county is red with a little dot of blue. And I see around here on a typical basis people open carrying, and I can tell you for a fact that anywhere people are open carrying, people are very polite. And while there is gun crime, it's mostly related to youth who, by the way, aren't supposed to have handguns to begin with. So any additional restrictions on individuals regarding prohibition of having weapons is irrelevant to those who are not supposed to have them but have them anyway. So this is my point. The law enforcement here, and I I'm on the social services committee. I work with law enforcement, meeting with the local chief deputy this Friday on some law enforcement issues. They are very targeted in enforcement. They don't go after citizens who have the legal right to carry, but they recognize there are some communities within the county who essentially teach their children to be essentially criminals. There's no amount of law that's going to stop these kids from carrying guns. So why, Bob, does the left focus so hard on laws when they know that no law is going to stop criminal behavior?
The essence of government generally, and our founders, our framers knew this, and these liberal anti-gun governors and other legislators know this, and that is it's all about what I call the big C. It's about control.
Yeah.
What they want to do is they want to control people. And whether they do that through regulating commerce or regulating education or regulating firearms, that is a way to exert control over the populace. And our framers knew that, which is why they crafted into the Constitution, including, of course, as you know, the Bill of Rights just a couple of years later, not only explicit guarantees that the right to keep and bear arms is not to be infringed, but a whole set of other provisions that limit the abuse, the control that government can exert. It all depends, though, as all three of us here and your listeners know, on having an informed and invigorated and involved citizenry, which we don't have in a lot of these states now.
Bob, I have to make the point, though. It seems to me like it's a political loser. 35 years ago, there was only one state had constitutional carry, that was Vermont. We're now up to 27 states. Gun sales, there's been this big push. There was a big push under Bill Clinton. There was a push under Barack Obama. There's now a push under Joe Biden. And we're seeing gun sales, or at least background checks, averaging over 1 million a month. That is huge. And we know there's over 400 million firearms privately owned in this country. That also is huge. But we're now aware and have the facts to back up. Over 50% of households have guns in them. That means that it's automatically more than 50% of adults are okay and have access to guns. And despite this obvious majority, we see this constant push from these control people. You're right. I agree with you that that's the main motive. But it's got to be a political loser, a vote loser, doesn't it?
It would seem to be, And today, thanks to the efforts of yourselves and people like Marion Hammer, who's been fighting for gun rights in Florida for well over 30 years now, thanks to the NRA, for which I now serve as the first vice president, and other pro-Second Amendment groups, it's much different now than it used to be. But the Democrats generally, and left-wing Democrats in particular, still have a desire to control people, and they will constantly do it. Just today, I think, or maybe yesterday, you might have seen this, Tony or Tim, President Biden has decided to create a new executive office.
I was going to bring this up. Yes.
Yeah. What better solution to a problem than to create another office, another bureaucracy?
Yeah.
To create an office within the White House on firearms prevention, gun violence prevention. California now recently passed, and I think the governor has yet to sign, a new tax on ammunition, firearms, and firearms parts. The left knows that even though these laws are more than likely to be declared unconstitutional, while they are in effect, they limit what people can do, and they provide fodder for prosecutions and regulatory action. So,
but Bob, prosecution is the big one there. We all know that felons are constantly being caught, and that is the one crime that gets plea bargained away.
Right.
Is a felon in possession.
Well, I want to hit that point, especially this office that's going to coordinate all these quote unquote gun violent programs. Mike Bloomberg, Bob, as you know, has a lot of money to throw around. Mm-hmm. And the left is very liberal about how they use these things. Mothers Against, what is it? There's a whole range of these things. I know I'm blocked by Sharon Watts, I think, where she's blocked me long ago on Twitter, because obviously they're insane and they have no interest in engaging in actual factual debate about these things. But that's my issue. To me, it's another Soviet level office that's going to have not only government funding, Bob, which concerns me enough. Obviously, we just crossed, at the time we're taping this, Bob, where your colleagues are going to have to deal with the fact we just passed, your former colleagues are going to have to face that we just passed $33 trillion in debt. And so the very fact that so much money is spent by the government to suppress our own rights is, to me, unconscionable. And then you have the added aspect of these private citizens like Bloomberg who have oodles and oodles of cash. I would say, Stormy Daniels had wet ones available to her, but Bloomberg has wet bundles available to him coming from all unknown sources. But the idea here is we have so much unlimited spending on their side. That's why I think these guys could get away with so much, Bob. I mean, is there anything we can do to counter the fact that so much of this is, first off, illegally driven by the government? The government should not tell us what kind of cars to drive, should not tell us what kind of stove to own. Nothing in the Constitution says that they have the right to tell me that my gas stove, which cooks just fine, is something that I need to have regulated by the government, nor do I believe the government should be telling me what kind of gun I can have, or ammunition, taxing my ammunition simply because they don't like the fact that I'm a citizen invested in my own security. What can we do to counter some of these? I don't even know how to describe these witch's brew of combinations between the government and private sector trying to suppress our rights, especially with people like Bloomberg.
It's a real unholy alliance. We see it. Well, let me first say that the left has become far more expert at using their money than the right and the Republicans have.
Oh yeah.
They are focused. They are coordinated, which is something that, in most respects, Republicans and conservatives are not. So you have people like Soros and Bloomberg who have, for all intents and purposes, unlimited funds, and they use it for their anti-Second Amendment activities, both directly to fund groups like Everytown and Brady and the Giffords group out in Arizona, but they also use it indirectly. And this is something we've seen and that the left has become very adept at in the last 2 or 3 election cycles, to slip money to local races, local prosecutors, county commissioners, sheriffs, even judges in local races. And they do it by disguising the money and slipping it in through various organizations. It doesn't have their name on it. And that's why, Tim, you might have been getting at this a few moments ago, we're seeing much of the criminal activity, even if it is caught, even if the perpetrators are caught and arrested, they're not prosecuted. Many, even if they are prosecuted, they are not kept in jail on bail, so they can commit additional offenses. And we have an opportunity, Tony, to get back to your question. There's a lot we can do. First of all, is to support groups. I put in a plug for my NRA, but there are other Second Amendment supporters out there.
And we do it too, right? Our group does it. Yeah.
They should support candidates who are openly understanding of and supportive of the Second Amendment, whether they're incumbents or challengers. We have an election cycle coming up next year that's extremely important. And fundamentally, the citizenry, people need to educate themselves as to what's going on. In your state of North Carolina, Tony, until very recently, it was a real problem because local sheriffs were simply refusing to process paperwork.
I know.
For individuals to be able to acquire a firearm. So even though the citizens pass a law and governors sign laws, if it provides authority, if it gives power or empowers local officials to implement it and they just don't do it, people have to not accept that. That's not a status quo that people have to accept. They need to fight it.
Before let me jump into that, Tim, because I had the experience that when I moved down here, I had to go through, and I know the local sheriff, Base Knight, he's a good guy, but I had to do it. I had to go kiss the ring to get it done. But this is something I know we're going to get in trouble for saying, but I got to say it. That was a remnant of Jim Crow. The idea that sheriffs could control individual ownership down to that level. North Carolina, like many other southern states, were essentially derivative of the old South. The old, by the way, we're having a Civil War monument fight right now here in town to move it or not. But the bottom line is most of the gun control laws were derivative of Southern whites wanting to prevent gun ownership by blacks. That's where a lot of this came from.
Correct.
And so the idea, and by the way, it was so ironic, Bob, because the people most vigorously fighting against giving up the sheriff's right were black folks in the House saying that giving this up would be Jim Crow. What? I mean, it was mind-numbingly like, how do you not understand the history of control of how these sheriffs were given this authority by the state to prevent ownership of minorities? How do you not get this? Yet they're the ones now screaming out to keep it. It got to that level of insanity here in this state. And it's like, I talk to folks on the left all the time. I'm friends with Dennis Kucinich and I'm friends with Tulsi Gabbard. And they've kind of had an awakening to recognize how crazy their side is. But think about that, Bob. You had individuals who were designed, who had designed the laws to be restrictive to the minorities. And then the very minorities who were prevented from owning are now calling for it to stay in place. It is like crazy.
Well, it is. And this goes back to the point that I made a few minutes ago. People are, to a larger extent than we need than we need in this country, historically ignorant.
Yes.
They don't understand. Not only do they not understand the basis of the Second Amendment, but the history of it. Now, luckily, the Supreme Court last year in the Bruin decision out of New York clarified to an extent, but it wasn't as clear a decision as we would have liked to have seen. But that Bruin decision that declared that restrictions like New York's longstanding Sullivan law that made it impossible for citizens to be in New York to be able to get a carry permit from their local officials was unconstitutional.
Right.
But States like New York itself and other states have spent the last 15 months since the Bruin decision in, I think it was June of 2022, figure out ways to get around it. And the Supreme Court will have to tackle this again. But even though we had the Bruin decision last year, we had the McDonald decision in 2010, we had the Heller decision in 2008, these governors and state legislatures have so little respect for what the Supreme Court made clear in those cases that they just basically are thumbing their nose at the Supreme Court. And this goes to another problem we have in society these days, and that is disrespect for the institutions of government, including the courts.
Yep. Bob, if I may, I'll jump in and just say I live in upstate New York, and I know exactly what you're talking about. New York has just brought in background checks for all ammunition purchases. So if I want to go and buy 10 rounds of 2.2 ammunition, I think, a grand total of maybe 75 cents, I have to go through a $3 background check to do that, which is, additional tax, additional time, and the system has collapsed because it's not set up to cope. So the instant background check system can't cope with it and is not, as we all know, an instant check system. I'd make one other comment as well, which is that a lot of my job with our group is very much along the lines of being data oriented. And I think you came close to using the term irrational about the opposition, the gun control people. Rationality shows that if you follow the data, the 26 states that in the last 35 years have brought in constitutional carry have not, as predicted by the gun control people, turned into bloodbaths. And interestingly, in 2019, here's a fact that people should just be aware of because it supports the case in all sorts of ways. Justifiable homicides in 2019. The FBI data set shows that for the first time ever, there were more civilian justifiable homicides than by law enforcement. You think about the implications of that. What that's saying is that armed civilians, law-abiding civilians, stopped more crime than the police did. They certainly stopped more violent crime.
The majority of those instances, the armed civilian, did not have to use their firearm.
Right.
Simply having it.
No. These are what justifiable homicides. They
I'm
did
sorry,
use
I thought
them.
you were talking about those who prevented criminal activity.
No.
Well, that's a whole different category. That's very
a whole
positive.
different but I'm talking about this. This is a solid FBI fact in their data set that there are more civilian justifiable homicides than law enforcement. That's huge.
Well, it is, and we had even back, Tony, you may remember this, back when I was in the House in the Judiciary Committee, we had several hearings on Virginia's Project Exile, for example, putting
I do remember that.
armed criminals away by using the federal laws in coordination with them. We also had hearings on the number of times, not reported by the mainstream media, that citizens used firearms to prevent crime.
Exactly.
I apologize, Tim. I thought that's what you were saying. But
That's okay.
both instances, both examples are very important. The number of times per each year that citizens use firearms to prevent crimes, as well as to protect themselves by the use of deadly force when necessary. That is justifiable homicide.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the spectrum of what we're talking about here are actual policies that work. And the exile policy, Bob, you refer to that. It's not so strong in Virginia now. I don't think they've actually been able to kind of restructure it. But I do know I work for Sheriff David Decatur. David is the sheriff of Stafford County. I'm his Homeland Security advisor. Mm-hmm. And Stafford County is a law and order county. They're just south of Quantico, and criminals don't want to stop there. As a matter of fact, it's well known. It's like you don't get stopped there because you're going to be prosecuted. And Dave Decatur, God bless him, when they had the issues with Antifa was doing protests in Fredericksburg. They started, Bob, you're familiar with the area then. You know, they have that bridge that goes across Highway 1. It comes across from Fredericksburg into his county. And you know what Dave Decatur did to tell him to not come into his county? Any guesses?
I'll leave it to you.
He put down tear gas across the bridge and said, "You're not coming into my county." And he stopped them dead, and they never came into the county. So I'm just telling, but to my point I'm making here is that one of the best deterrents from crime is preventing criminals from coming to your county. And if you have actually created a system where people are informed, trained, and equipped to handle themselves with weapons, and you actually prosecute criminals who do act in a felonious way, you can actually protect your citizens by the fact you create the perception. And as you know, Bob, perception's reality in many people's minds. And if you believe you're going to be prosecuted, bad things are going to come to you if you're a criminal, that's a preventative measure that most people should embrace, I think. So
thank goodness for sheriffs across this country.
Yeah.
Sheriffs, with very, very few exceptions, are elected by the people in their jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm.
They are not appointed by the local political authorities, such as mayors, city councils, or county commissions. And sheriffs, by and large, we see this in New Mexico, for example,
Yep.
sheriffs refusing to enforce the governor and the Secretary of Health's draconian anti-Second Amendment executive orders are refusing to enforce them. And the sheriffs, such as when you mentioned in Stafford County and many other counties across this country, are actually working with the citizens, not
Absolutely.
against the citizens, to prevent crime.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So we got to take a break. We're going to come up on part 2 and continue this conversation with Bob Barr, the good Barr. As some of the audience knows, I had my run-in with a guy named Bill Barr. Bill yelled at me and told me to give up one of the whistleblowers who actually had witnessed voter fraud. But that's a story for another day. So we're going to come back with the good Barr, the Bob Barr, and Tim Wilson and the rest of the team right after this break. We'll be right back. Hey, this is The Hard Truth. Tony Shaffer, part 2, powered by 6 Hour, Never Settle. I had a choice of what I carried in combat. I always carried the best. The best is 6 Hour, Never Settle. You should carry the same thing. We're on the America Out Loud podcast network, as well as the Out Loud radio network. We're on both. And, of course, projectsentinel.com.net. We're here for all of your informational needs. And, of course, before I go, I always do a shout-out to our friend Cherie Curry, who does our bumper and theme. Cherie, we love you. Thanks for being on last week with us. It was a lot of fun. And we're going to roll right into this now with the rest of the team. We have from the gun control paradise of Hawaii, the precocious Tanya Miller. We have the Pippin, Elizabeth Breckenkamp, fresh back from dancing in a disco in Tennessee, right? That was part of a film.
Oh, the dance was in Baltimore. The Christmas movie was Tennessee. Yeah,
oh,
it's for the new version of the Crow movie. Yeah, where the Crow is like beating the crap out of people, and we're dancing. And anyway.
Well, who doesn't want to dance with a crow beating the crap out of people? I don't know who
it was fun.
That. And then, of course, the precocious, the ever present Chris Cordani running the boards, doing the time, doing the clock, and obviously we're back with Tim Wilson, and his good teeth are showing through still, very shiny. Good job, Tim. And we're back. So Tanya, take off.
All right, thank you, Bob, for participating and joining Tony and us with the show on this hot topic. Our last episode, I got a little hot under the collar, sharing how difficult it is as a Hawaii resident, especially. I gave the example as a single female, or an example of somebody who maybe had treated for depression, maybe post-traumatic stress disorder, which, that affects many veterans, but also victims of sexual assault, crime victims, things like that. And so I personally, just so everyone knows, I take gun ownership very, very seriously. And I think, unfortunately, some people we all know here, especially you, Bob, dealing with this issue, this hot topic issue. Some people just assume that we're nonchalant about it, but I know that legal gun owners take it very seriously. And persons like myself, I'm not, I don't, but I because I take it seriously, I want to know more. And I know that taking on that responsibility is a huge responsibility, and all of the details of gun ownership and carrying or concealing or keeping at home, all of the safety and everything. So I commend everyone who really cares about the issues in training, and commend all of the entities who are for that. And I just want to say, as someone who's a former Democrat, living in a blue state, really a lot of us want to be able to own guns. A lot, even Democrats. Like, there's a huge assumption, but there's a huge assumption that those of us who don't already own a gun don't want to have the access ever. And it's like, no, I do. I want to know my rights to be able to access a weapon should I choose that I'm ready for that responsibility, or that I have the need. And that need is arising, and that's what I was speaking on the last episode. And when I started looking, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm not really that wrong on any of my fears about this, because I looked up a case. Are you familiar with the Navy officer in Honolulu who had to hand over his weapons because he had said that, yes, he had been treated for
PTSD?
It was Michael Santucci and O'Grady Beck were the attorneys. And he actually won the lawsuit. So he had to turn over his guns, and now we still have troublesome language. And this is what is concerning to Hawaii residents, is that we have to go seek out lawsuits on our own dime because we're getting set in the situation. So check this out. You guys were just talking about the Attorney General. The Attorney General's office noted that at least one of our state's major healthcare providers, they don't name which, recommends denial for nearly any mental health issue or treatment, and does not provide denied applicants the means to get clearance, which is forcing them to, seek clearance from outside doctors. And then also the most common reason that firearm permits are denied are mental health issues. 37%, and that was in 2020. And so, this is a case of Michael Santucci, Navy officer. If anybody wants to look into it, it's a story on civilbeat.org. And it's pretty concerning because the language in the application, I just looked again last night, the language is still very, you have to spell out your symptoms if you've ever been treated. And I understand all that, but they're saying the language that they use is too difficult. And they even had a psychiatrist saying, we don't even use that language. So really, and this is what's most troublesome, tell me what you think about the chief of police has the access. You have to sign a waiver, all your medical records that contribute to your treatment. The chief of police, it literally says that the chief of police, whether if it's Honolulu, it's Honolulu chief of police. If it's Maui, it's Maui's chief of police. If you're submitting, so how does this, from my understanding, that's a lot of scrutiny. It's the second amendment, and the 14th Amendment that's being violated, and a whole lot of other. Please tell me your thoughts on this issue.
I certainly, living in Hawaii is, let me put it this way. I would never live in Hawaii for the very reason that you indicated. One of the reasons that I live in Georgia, and I've lived here for well over 4 decades, is because we have had a succession of governors who Democrat and Republican, who understand and support the right of the citizens to keep and bear arms. I would not live in a state where that right has been so decimated, so limited, that it has become next to worthless as it has been, as you've described it, in Hawaii. The reason that states are able to get away with this is manyfold. First of all, of course, people elect these people to public office, whether they are county commissioners, whether they are governors, state legislators, members of Congress, or whatnot. So, ultimately, it's the people that are to blame for electing and keeping these people in office. The courts are a problem. Thank goodness we have had, as you might have heard in the first segment of the show, I mentioned the trilogy of Supreme Court cases going back to 2008 Heller case, and then we had McDonald in 2010, and most recently in 2022 the Bruin decision, that have provided some support for the manner in which the Second Amendment was designed to operate. The operative term, the operative word in the Second Amendment is not firearms, it's not guns, it's people, the right of the people. And a lot of times people miss that. They think it's about guns. It's not. It's about a right of the people. But the Supreme Court has not yet done what I would like to see it do, and that is to declare once and for all that the right to keep and bear arms is a pre-existing privilege or immunity. That is a right that pre-exists the formation of our country and the Constitution. It's a basic human right given to us by our Creator, and therefore it has and should have applicability everywhere in the country. So you don't have a state like Hawaii versus a state like Georgia. Part of the problem also, Tanya, aside from that broader problem, is the way different courts in different states deal with the issue of mental incompetency. Now, granted, the words in the federal statute in Title 18 that one of the prohibitions on firearms ownership under federal law is that the person has been declared a mental incompetent. It's an old term, but it also provides a great deal of latitude for different states to, and even private parties to interpret it very, very broadly. We need clarification on that by the courts.
Yeah.
It's that broad language that's very concerning for everybody. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
So Bob, before we let Elizabeth answer her question, I got to ask you. You need to be straight up with us. We all know you live in Georgia because you can have an opium smoking bed in your office. I mean, come on, we know this. I've seen it. I've personally seen it. So, that's why you live in Georgia, right?
Well, it's in storage now. Not big enough for it. But if you want to buy it, I'll sell it to you.
Well, good. Well, that's a great offer. We'll throw some coin together. But just on that point though. And by the way, Bob, I forgot to mention you ran for the presidency as the Libertarian candidate a few years ago, right? I was one of your advisors.
Yes, sir.
So another thing that Bob did. I forgot to mention that. All right. So sorry. Okay. Let Elizabeth roll.
No, that's okay.
Go ahead.
No, Tanya makes so many great points. It seems like it's state by state, 2A rights. And like you were saying, Bob, it would be nice if the Supreme Court would just state once and for all, unilaterally, that exactly what it says in the Constitution should be, applied in every state so that the governors don't have the power or the authority to do this. So I know, lots of times we'll say, well, we need to hold the governor accountable, Governor Grisham for making her crazy new legislation and what's happening in Hawaii. But how? I mean, I'm thinking, yeah, we have to hold them accountable, but how? Do we have to just constantly call them, write them, email them? Do we have to call our own representatives to put pressure on our representatives to hold them accountable? I mean, and the other thing, of course, is votes. Votes have consequences. So we need to educate and inform people, which is one of the reasons why we do this show. We want to educate people and let people kind of see when you vote for someone who says they're for gun control, you have to think about the logical consequences. If you vote for this person, they're going to try to take your rights away. So trying to educate people on why your votes matter. And so I'm going to kind of leave that open to you.
Well, if fundamentally that is the way we solve these problems. It starts with educating people, and particularly voters, with registering voters, with getting voters out to the polls. It includes nominating good candidates, being involved in one, either the Democrat or the Republican Party or the Libertarian Party, whatever party it is that has the power in your state to nominate and get people on the ballot who understand and support the Second Amendment and who will do so openly, not just in the privacy of an office. But it also requires people to pay far closer attention to people that they elect to judicial offices.
Right.
Those largely are those that come on the state ballot at sort of the end of the ballot. People either forget about voting for them, they just want to vote for president, senator, and member of Congress,
Right.
and they forget about those judgeships. But that is ultimately, and it shouldn't be this way, we shouldn't have to turn to the courts to make sure that we have a constitutionally guaranteed God-given right, but we do now because government has become so powerful. We need to bring actions against these government actors. As soon as Governor, I think it's was it Lujan something or other, Grisham out in New Mexico, issued her 2 executive orders, and Secretary of Health Allen then issued his action plan on September 8th, I think it was. Within just a day, I think, actions were filed in court, including one a couple of days later by the NRA, and at least part of her executive actions were halted. People need to not be afraid to go into court to seek injunctions to stop these things, because there are a lot of good groups out there, not just the NRA, primarily the NRA, but others as well, that have the wherewithal that individuals don't have to bring actions in court to stop these things. And there are, every judge won't do it, but there are enough judges out there that understand these issues. And the left is very good at judge shopping. We need to do the same thing.
So, on that line, Bob, the issue of how that all transpired and the response so far, the fact is that you had people like Newsom, who I think, had that been successful, were ready to pounce on it and expand it out rapidly. I think you would have seen California go with some emergency order. And that's my point. We can debate the legality all day, but when you have politicians who are willing to use laws, regulations, and policies which are not designed to be a gun control tool, in this case she was trying to use a health emergency. And this is a danger of the administrative state. And I asked Cherie Curry, and I'll ask you, what's the greater health risk? The governor reaching out with unwashed hands and grabbing male genitalia, which she did, or the fact that people aren't going to be following gun laws? I mean, which one is actually? So I would go, I think the health issue obviously is her grabbing, but that's just me. But the point is that she used something that obtuse as a tool of control, and so and then she's weakened the ability of the state of New Mexico now to actually invoke authorities when they need to on health issues. That diminishes the whole system.
Tony,
it's like 1984.
You put your finger on something extremely important that a lot of folks don't realize, and that is not only in New Mexico, but here in Georgia, and I suspect in every state of the union, because I've done some research on this, not recently, but I think that in every state, governors have enacted by legislatures and signed by various governors emergency powers. And in Georgia, for example, as in New Mexico, once a governor declares an emergency, and it's a very undefined or broadly defined term in the statutes, then they have in their quiver, so to speak, arrows that they can use for virtually anything, including expressly firearms or gun control. People need to take a look at these emergency power statutes, as I say, that I think are present in every state. Thank goodness in Georgia we have a governor that doesn't misuse that power, but we saw this in spades during COVID. The power to declare emergencies in these states was already on the books. All they had to do was flip to the right page, put that down in writing, and presto, they could take away people's civil liberties.
Right.
That's already happened here in Hawaii, too, for sure.
Let's not give Kathy Hochul and Phil Murphy any ideas, okay? All right, let's not do that. Tony, it is that time now.
Yeah.
Tony's takes.
It is time for Tony's takes.
By the way, speaking of takes, I want to ask a question, Chris, regarding Hochul.
Yes.
Why does she look like the lead female actress in the movie Plan 9 from Outer Space? Google it. I mean, they are
always
the same
wa-
person.
When you asked
They
me
are
that
the
the
same
first time
person.
on Culture Wars, I looked it
I
up
know.
and it was uncanny. Anybody who's listening, look it up. It is uncanny, and that woman does
serious.
not
Just Google
unclench
it.
her jaw.
Plan 9 from
Yeah.
Outer Space.
No.
It's just, they are the same person. They have to be the same person. I don't know.
Yeah, she talks with her jaw stuck
That's
together.
like
Yeah.
this.
Just like that.
Oh.
I'm not saying she's an alien. Just for the audience to understand, I'm not accusing the governor of being an alien. Just alien-like.
But if she is, she's
as
legal.
a citizen of New York, I find her closer to Janet from the Rocky Horror Show.
All right, that works. Susan Sarandon, the real actress too. They're pretty close. Anyway, we'll get that another time. Tony's Takes is powered by Sig Sauer.
It is
Never
6 Hour.
settle.
Never
Tony,
settle.
You never settle.
I never settle.
But there is a settling going on. Ray Epps has been arrested. That sounds like good news, but
Oh,
it's
God.
not. It was one misdemeanor, disorderly conduct out of the January 6th mostly peaceful protest. I don't think people will read past the headlines on this, but there is an interesting headline. UPI actually listed Epps as a Trump supporter. Tony, what's your take?
So he was also indicted for removing pepperoni from pizza in D.C. as well. They got him on a couple of big charges there. I wouldn't be
And that
surprised if they
mattress
get him.
tag you ripped
I
it
wouldn't
off.
be surprised if they get him for moping with intent to loiter. I mean, they really went after him. That's
Possession
my
of an ugly
point. It's
face.
a joke. It's a joke. Ray Epps was one of the I'm sorry.
Yeah, I want to hear what you really think, because I'm wondering. Don't you think it's a cover, Tony? Isn't
It
this
is.
a cover because it's a little slap on the wrist?
For the
Because
audience-
perhaps he was
For the
more
audience who
involved.
follows me, I finally got Ray Epps to respond to me on Twitter, and I was trolling him hard. And the moment I got him to respond to basically say something like, I'm innocent, I got suspended permanently from Twitter, although Elon brought me back. But I'm telling you, there was something about him being protected. I have no doubt at this point, the feds had so much heat on him, they had to do something. Like, we can't get away with him having been the guy that actually breached the line on the 6th. We got to throw something in his way. So, next thing you know, they're going to say he had anchovy breath when they arrested him or something. It's going to be totally ridiculous. So
It really felt like a slap on the wrist to
It is
appease
a slap on
people.
the
It's to
wrist, yeah.
appease.
it is.
Yes, look, and it's like it's an embarrassing because given the length of the terms for everybody else and what they did or didn't do and what he did and what everyone has record and evidence of, and yet this is what it is. It feels as if it's to say, yeah, but it really looks even more so to protecting.
Right.
So
Gentlemen,
Bob,
and-
any takes on Ray Epps? I mean, he was on the FBI's top 10 most wanted, and all of a sudden he's like a saint. I don't know how that works. So
Well, I think President Clinton, I'm sorry, you mentioned Clinton earlier. President Biden,
they're the same person.
he's decided now to create something that will solve all of these problems. We will now have a climate corps
Oh, yeah.
Ah,
Oh, no.
Well, an inflection
under
point.
the umbrella of AmeriCorps.
Yeah.
Done such wonderful things for our country. We're now going to have the Climate Corps out there. They want to get 20,000 people up and running in support of this, the climate police, within the first year. And I'm sure that one of the first that they'll sign up will be Ray Epps.
Ray Epps and Al Gore on the trail together. What a duo. I mean, that's like
Oh, wow.
Batman and Robin. That's like boy, that's gold.
hey,
By
we
the way,
can always
Bob,
offer
you
to-
probably
offer to
didn't know
send-
this.
We can
But,
offer to send them to Iran.
Well, we can do that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you knew this, Bob. I've got a degree in environmental studies, and I this is a topic that we should talk about more if we'll have you back, because I don't know. I asked Cherie this last week too. Do you know how many planets there are on the? Do you know how many trees there are on the planet this moment we're speaking right now?
How many trees there are on?
Trees.
Trees.
Trees. TREES. Do you know how many trees there are? You want to make a stab?
You mean
I know. I'm giving you all these hard questions today.
how many
so.
trillions?
The tree. Well,
Lots
you,
for
like
Georgia,
Cherie,
right? Yeah.
you and Cherie got it within an order of magnitude. There's 3.04 trillion trees.
Mhm.
Do you know how much carbon a typical tree consumes over a year?
How much carbon they consume?
Yeah, to process for purposes of creating oxygen.
I'm sure that the Climate Corps will tell me, but
Well, the answer is 48 pounds. So if you multiply 48 pounds point to 3.04 trillion, we don't have a carbon problem. We have a problem that does not exist. Carbon simply is plant food. And the idea that we're now making carbon an enemy is insane. And it turns out one of the things we've noticed that fossil fuel is not fossil fuel. The Earth actually regenerates through the processing of hydrocarbons, fossil fuel. It is not. It is a renewable process. They've been suppressing studies which showed that the abandoned wells in western Pennsylvania were somehow magically refilled when they started going through and pulling out oils. Like, how'd that happen? Well, because it regenerates. So my point being is that this whole green energy, this energy crisis is another inflection point. Is that the right term, Chris?
Inflection point.
For the insertion of Marxism within our society, within the
it's all
United
about
States.
control, Tony.
It's all about control. Absolutely.
I really
Sorry,
think
Chris,
they
go
use.
ahead.
I really think they use George Orwell's 1984 as their playbook. They just read through it. It's like, oh, this is what we do, and then this is what we do.
And
Right,
and the
Chris, one
concern
more
is
real quick.
Hawaii is the test ground. They're testing the ground. They already got the climate stuff. They're the smart cities, the control, the emergency use, all that. So
Yeah.
Chris,
Here's another one. Here's
one
another
last one.
One more. Tony's takes. The U.S.
Right.
Senate has officially dumbed down its dress code to allow Senator John Fetterman to wear his hoodie, sweatshirt, and shorts. Now, McDonald's, as a friend of mine put it, has a stricter dress code than the Senate floor.
It's true.
What's next? Maisie Hirono in a tube top? Mitch McConnell in a leisure suit? Cory Booker in a clown costume?
Well, the answer is they want to have surgical gowns available for all members in case the seniors level guys pass out and need surgery right on the spot. So that's why they did it. I mean, come on. Who doesn't want to see Mitch McConnell running around with his back open in the Senate? I mean, come on. Who doesn't want to see that?
Oh, like Jack Nicholson in that movie.
Jack Nicholson. Here's
well, it's
money.
just more. It's removing professionalism. It's the decorum. Getting down to business. Expectations when you come and you're dressed professionally.
Right.
When people start dressing down, it's sort of like when it's it just depends like this.
Yeah.
When you're doing it here, now who's going to follow suit? And then youth are going to look. Yeah, I mean, what are we teaching?
Lowered
everyone
expectations.
here?
Is it because
Exactly.
Fetterman can't find a suit that fits him?
Same as education.
I'm thinking that's it.
Let's
Don't-
lower
don't-
all the expectations.
Don't you
Lower
think there's a
expectations.
great opportunity here, though, for us to actually be able to sort out which senators from now on we'll support by their sartorial standards? Those that continue to wear a jacket and tie, I'm going to be in favor of.
Yeah.
I'll go with that. I'd be
And I
embarrassed
don't
not
care
to.
which party they are.
Right.
I like the idea of Maisie Hirono actually running around, in surfwear. I don't know what's wrong with that. I think, she should reflect
No, but
Hawaii.
she did use the health issue, like the other New Mexico. She used that health issue when parents were talking about the very really graphic things in our children's books at school with the sex ed stuff and leading into LGBTQ+. She invoked how instead of that being dangerous to our youth, parents were talking about that being dangerous to our youth. She invoked, guns are more of a problem. And it's like, we can't talk about this issue right here. She's invoking it and she's she's linking those issues to health.
We could get into that. We could go down that path because right now California is a battleground for parental rights. I was actually listening to NPR today, driving back. My truck had a nail in it. I listened to the NPR because it's like, you ever watch Portlandia? It's like, Portlandia is NPR. It's like, oh my God, these people live in it. But they were bemoaning the fact that parents have no rights. That's the left's posit. We should have a whole show on that, but we don't have time. It's time to wrap it up. Bob Barr, the good Barr, not the bad Barr, which, Bob, thank you for being here today on The Hard Truth.
Thanks, Bob.
Great being here.
But we'd like to have you back if you come back and talk about the climate emergency. Because apparently our pants are all on fire. We just don't know it because apparently everything is hot, and all that. So, but we'd like to have you back at some point. If you come back, I think we'd continue to have fruitful and honest discussions for our audience to learn from. So, anyway, that's it for the crew. From the crew, thank you all for joining us for The Hard Truth this week. We'll see you again next week. Thanks for being here, and see you soon.
Bye now.
Bye, everybody.
I woke up in a derelict delirium. To a stranger's kiss and a broken opinion.